They said he was too slow, too clumsy, not fit to serve heroes. They were right. He didn't serve them. He served with something much greater, and he had the scars to prove it. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We'd love to see how far these stories travel. And if you've ever met someone ordinary who turned out to be unforgettable, tell us your story below. The ballroom shimmered under the glow of polished chandeliers. Crystal glasses clinked, silverware danced, and laughter echoed through the red, white, and blue decorated hall. The annual Veterans Honor Banquet was in full swing, and the air buzzed with stories from years past. Some true, others inflated with bourbon and bravado. Then came him. He shuffled in from the kitchen like a shadow nobody invited. Wearing a pressed white shirt, a simple black vest, and scuffed black shoes that whispered more than they stepped, he barely drew a glance. His hair was gray and tightly cropped, his eyes low, his back slightly hunched. No name tag, no smile, no medal, just a tray in hand. "Hey, careful, Grandpa," one guest chuckled as the waiter placed a glass of water in front of him. Laughter followed. Not cruel at first, but close. He didn't respond, just nodded and walked away. At table 9, Lieutenant Robert Flash Kendricks, now retired but still loud, leaned toward his buddies. "Where do they find these guys? Thought we were being honored tonight, not babysitting old-timers." "Probably a volunteer," someone muttered. "Probably walked in off the street. Look at those hands shaking like a leaf." They all laughed again, except one, a young man named Drew, barely out of basic, his first time at the banquet. He didn't laugh. He watched. The old man returned again and again, serving dishes, clearing plates, refilling coffee, never saying a word. Once, a glass slipped from his hand. It didn't shatter, just clinked awkwardly onto the tablecloth. Kendricks rolled his eyes. "See? Told you. Should have let the Boy Scouts cater this." Another chuckle. Another round of backpats. Another sideways glance from Drew. The dinner dragged into speeches, commendations, stories from the field. Nobody noticed the waiter standing in the back, still, watching, waiting, until the raffle started. He stepped forward with the prize, a folded American flag encased in glass, resting atop a wooden base. It was meant for the guest of honor. As he walked it across the floor, someone said it again, louder this time. "Don't trip, old man." A burst of laughter, a whistle. And then it happened. The old man stopped. Not abruptly, but deliberately. He placed the flag down on the stage and slowly turned to face the crowd. His sleeve had slipped. The room fell silent. From wrist to elbow, his forearm was covered in thick, ropey scars. Not surgical, not accidental. These were earned, etched through fire, shrapnel, and time. Someone gasped. He didn't explain, didn't raise his voice. He just looked at Kendricks. And for the first time all night, Kendricks looked away. And then Drew stood up, not out of obligation, not because anyone asked him to, but because he saw what no one else did. He walked over to the man, offered a firm salute, and whispered, "Thank you for your service, sir." The room didn't clap. It didn't need to, because silence had said enough. Drew's salute didn't go unnoticed. The young recruit stood tall, eyes locked with the old man's. The silence stretched, not awkward, but reverent. And then, slowly, one by one, others at the banquet rose from their chairs. It wasn't a standing ovation. It was an apology. Lieutenant Kendricks, still seated, felt the weight of the room shift. His jaw clenched. He reached for his bourbon, but his fingers trembled. "What now?" he muttered. "We saluting kitchen help?" Even he knew. The joke didn't land. Backstage, event coordinator Cheryl Monroe watched the room with narrowed eyes. "Who is that?" she asked an aide. "I don't remember hiring anyone like him," the aide whispered back. "He showed up an hour before, said he was back up from catering." "Get the catering manager," Cheryl snapped. Now! Meanwhile, the old man had quietly slipped out. Drew couldn't sit still. He followed him through the side door, into the stainless steel world of the banquet kitchen. Pans hissed. Shoes squeaked. Orders flew. But for Drew, the only thing that mattered was the silhouette ahead. Sir, he called out. The man turned. Calm, unbothered. I know that tattoo, Drew said. My grandfather had one. First recon. The man's expression didn't change. I just want to know your name, Drew added, softer. After a long pause, the man said, Call me Walter. Drew took a step forward. Why are you here, Walter? Why work an event like this? Walter shrugged. I like quiet places. You don't belong in a kitchen, Drew replied. Walter's smile was faint. Kid, I belonged in places you wouldn't last an hour. This? This is peace. Before Drew could say more, a sharp voice broke in. There he is. Cheryl entered with 2 security guards and a clipboard. You're not authorized to be here. Walter stepped back, ready to leave. But Drew stood firm. He's not a threat. He's not on the list, Cheryl insisted. He's trespassing. He's a veteran, Drew shot back. He deserves respect. Cheryl raised an eyebrow. You know him personally? Drew hesitated. No. But I know the look. I know the silence. She turned to security. Escort. Him out. Then came another voice. You'll do no such thing. Everyone turned. It was Lieutenant Kendricks, his face pale, his voice quieter than usual. That man is Walter Kane. The name rippled like a shockwave. Walter didn't respond. Kendricks stepped forward. You led Ghost Platoon Operation Firewell. They teach your tactics in SEAL briefings. Walter's eyes narrowed. That was a long time ago. Doesn't matter, Kendricks said. I insulted a man I should have saluted, he offered. His hand. Walter looked at it, but didn't take it. He simply nodded. It was enough. The room held its breath. Then Cheryl cleared her throat and mumbled, Let's give them space. The staff shuffled away. Later that night, after most of the guests had left and the band had packed up, Drew sat alone at a corner table, spinning a half-filled glass in silence. A folded napkin landed in front of him. Walter. He sat across from Drew, no words, just presence. You stayed, Drew said. Didn't plan to, Walter replied. But things change. Drew hesitated. Why now? Why reveal yourself? Walter stared at the empty dance floor. Because one day, silence doesn't feel like strength anymore. It feels like surrender. Drew nodded slowly. You were Ghost Platoon, weren't you? Walter exhaled. We were never supposed to exist, no names, no glory, just shadows. But you saved lives, Drew said. Walter gave a faint nod. We all did what we had to. After a pause, Walter looked directly at him. Don't lose what you believe in, kid. Not everyone with a uniform knows what it costs. And not everyone without one deserves to be dismissed, Drew replied. Walter smiled, genuinely this time. As the final lights dimmed, Drew extended his hand. Walter looked at it. Then he took it. A quiet bond, not forged by rank, but by respect. And for the first time in a long while, Walter Kane felt seen, not as a shadow, but as a man. The banquet hall lay quiet now, stripped of its glamour. Only a few staff moved through the silence, stacking chairs and sweeping up confetti. Walter stood near the exit, coat in hand, when he heard footsteps behind him. It was Drew, again. Thought you left, Walter said without turning. I couldn't, Drew replied. Not after that handshake. Walter gave a tired smile. It's just a handshake, son. No, Drew insisted. It was history reaching back. There was a pause. Then Walter spoke. History is heavy. You carry it long enough, you forget who you were before. They walked together, side by side through the back corridors of the hotel, Finally, they stopped at a service exit where the night air cut sharp against the skin. "You fought in operations most of us only whisper about," Drew said. "But no files. No records." "Why?" Walter leaned against the cold concrete wall. "Because we weren't meant to be remembered. They called us shadow teams. We went where politics couldn't." Drew's eyes widened. "Ghost Platoon wasn't just a code name, was it?" Walter looked at him with a gaze that froze the air. "Ghosts don't get medals," he said. "We get silence." Drew hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket. "Oh, sealed letter with the Navy's emblem. I got accepted into the SEAL officer pipeline, but I haven't signed it yet." Walter raised an eyebrow. "What are you waiting for?" "I don't know," Drew admitted. "I thought I did, but after tonight." Walter looked down at the envelope, then back at Drew. "You think courage is about charging into fire? It's not. It's about standing still when everyone else runs. Can you do that?" Drew nodded slowly. Walter continued, "Then sign it. But know this, if you're lucky, no one will ever know your name." Suddenly, headlights flashed across the lot. A black SUV pulled up. The door opened, and out stepped a woman in her 60s, stern posture, military boots. "Kane?" she called out. Walter straightened. "Colonel Rivera," he said quietly. Drew blinked. "You know her?" "She commanded my last mission," Walter replied, "and the only one who ever filed a report about it." Rivera approached with a folder in hand. "I told you I'd find you. Took 10 years, but here we are." Walter took the file and opened it. Inside were black and white photos, coordinates, and, at the very bottom, a faded commendation form. "For what you did in Orzaba," she said. "They finally approved it." Walter stared at the paper for a long time. "I didn't do it for medals." "I know," Rivera replied, "but some truths deserve daylight." Drew stepped back, overwhelmed by the moment. Walter looked at him and held up the commendation. "See this? This doesn't change anything. What matters is what you carry when no one's watching." Drew clutched the envelope in his hand, and finally, he signed it. In the shadows, under a flickering street lamp, legacy passed, not with noise, but with quiet conviction. Walter folded the file, tucked it into his coat, and walked off into the night without a word. And Drew? He stood still, but something inside him had already started to move. 3 days later, Drew sat alone in the Naval Archives room in D.C., fluorescent lights humming above and stacks of declassified files surrounding him. The weight of his decision still lingered. He had signed the letter, but something about Walter's silence and that woman's sudden appearance stuck with him. He needed to know. A young archivist approached, holding a slim envelope. "This is the file you requested. Operation Orzaba, 1987. Redacted, mostly." Drew opened it. Pages blacked out in thick ink, lines missing. But there were fragments. "Extraction failed. Unauthorized incursion. Civilian loss minimized." And one name, Kane, W.J. He turned the last page. A photograph was stapled to it. 5. And again, the same photo Walter had shown him, but here the image had labels. Ghost Platoon, Bravo Echo 9. Only one line under Kane's name remained untouched, presumed dead. No formal burial. Drew exhaled. Whatever Walter had been through, the world had tried to erase it, and he had let it happen. Back at the base that night, Drew walked to the old chapel near the water. It was always empty, a place forgotten by most. Except tonight. Walter was there. Sitting in the front pew, coat folded beside him, staring at a wall like it held a memory only he could see. Drew sat beside him. Silence passed between them. Finally, Walter spoke. "So, what did you find?" Drew held out the photo. "They declared you dead. No honors, no truth, just black ink." Walter chuckled bitterly. "That's how ghosts stay hidden. Why didn't you come forward?" Because I wasn't ready to live with the version of myself they would create, Walter said. They want heroes they can parade, not the ones who did what had to be done in the dark. Drew clenched his fists. But what about justice? Walter looked at him. Justice is a nice word. But sometimes, son, survival is all the justice we get. A long pause. Then Drew whispered, I want people to know. About you. About Bravo Echo 9. Walter's voice turned cold. And what would that do? Bring back my men? Clear my name? Or just make you feel like you fixed something you don't understand? I'm not trying to fix you, Drew said softly. I'm trying not to forget you. Walter's eyes shimmered, but he turned away. Outside, a storm was gathering, light rain tapping the stained glass windows. Walter rose, walked to the front of the chapel, and lit a single candle. One for every man I couldn't bring back, he murmured. Drew stood behind him. You kept their names? Walter nodded. All 5. In order. Their birthdays, too. And yours? Walter smiled faintly. I stopped having one the day they died. Suddenly, the chapel door creaked. Cheryl entered. Clipboard gone, demeanor different. She wasn't just a banquet manager. I knew I'd find you here, she said to Walter. Colonel Rivera wants to talk again about the file. Walter didn't move. She thinks someone in command buried it, intentionally. Walter's jaw tightened. Tell her I'm done digging. But Cheryl wasn't leaving. She also said, if you don't come forward, she will. Walter turned. His past had stayed buried for decades, but now it clawed its way back, and for the first time in years, he wasn't sure he could stop it. The mess hall was unusually quiet that morning. A light drizzle tapped the windows, the kind that soaked into your bones if you stood outside too long. Drew sat alone, stirring cold eggs on his plate, mind drifting back to Walter's story from the night before, that mission, that name, Morales, that silence. He'd barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the glint of the trident tattoo, the ghost of Walter in a different uniform, a different life. Suddenly, a tray dropped across from him. It was Cheryl. We need to talk. Drew straightened. About him? Cheryl nodded. Colonel Rivera's coming back today, and if Walter doesn't speak now, this story's going to be written by someone who wasn't there. We both know how that ends. I've tried, Drew said quietly. He shuts down. Cheryl leaned in. Then we push. Gently, but firmly. He's not the only one who needs this. You're not sleeping. You're carrying it too. Before Drew could answer, the doors swung open. Walter stood at the threshold, rain dripping off his coat. He scanned the room, eyes pausing on the two of them, then walked over. You're talking about me, he said calmly. Cheryl didn't deny it. We're worried about you. Walter sat down. You don't have to be. You're wrong, Drew replied. I see it in you. The weight, the silence. It's not just about the mission anymore. It's about who you were, and who you're afraid to be again. Walter didn't respond, but his hands, usually steady, clenched slightly. On the table, Cheryl pressed. Do you remember Operation Iron Harvest? His jaw tightened. That was classified, he muttered. Not anymore, she said. Not after the declassification orders last month. Rivera has clearance and questions. For the first time, Walter looked shaken. You read the reports? He asked. I read what they allowed, Cheryl replied. It didn't match your eyes. Silence fell again, but this time it trembled with emotion. Then Walter whispered, Morales wasn't supposed to die, but command. They pulled the plug mid-exfil. We were expendable. He died believing I betrayed him. Drew felt the words, like a gut punch, and you survived, he said quietly. Walter nodded, eyes hollow. Barely. Just then, a knock came at the glass door. Colonel Rivera stood outside, a folder tucked under her arm, rain pooling around her boots. No one moved. Until Walter did. He stood slowly, straightened his back, and for the first time since Drew met him looked every bit the soldier he once was. "Tell her I'll talk," he said. Cheryl blinked. "Now?" "No. At the chapel. Tonight. Just her. No cameras. No uniform. Just truth." That evening, the chapel lights flickered on once again. Walter sat in the front row, alone, until Colonel Rivera stepped in, without medals, without rank, only her notebook in hand. She sat beside him, quietly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Walter opened his mouth and the weight of decades began to shift. The chapel's old wood creaked as Colonel Rivera sat beside Walter, her uniform absent by request. In its place, a gray sweater, a simple notebook, and the silent weight of knowing too much, and not enough. Walter sat stiff, his eyes fixed on the candle burning near the altar. "I haven't been in a chapel since '94, he murmured. Rivera offered a quiet nod. "Then this is overdue." He gave a dry smile. "That's what they said about my medals, too." She didn't push. She just opened her notebook to a blank page and let the silence thicken. Finally, Walter spoke. "Operation Iron Harvest was never about extraction," he said, voice low. "It was about containment." Rivera glanced up. "Containment of what?" "Intel. People. Mistakes." Walter's hand trembled slightly. "Morales wasn't the only one. We were ordered to leave 3 locals behind. They'd helped us, fed us, hid us from drone sweeps. Then came the call. Exfil now. Burn your tracks." Morales refused. He stayed. "So did I." Rivera's face hardened. "But the file says you both made it out." He laughed bitterly. "Only one of us did. Command faked a joint extraction, covered it up to preserve the program. They needed a clean win, a hero's tale, so they gave them me." She stared at him, stunned. "You were the scapegoat and the cover story?" "I was the one who lived," Walter replied. "That's all they needed, a breathing headline." Silence. Then Rivera asked the question she had come to ask all along. Why the janitor routine? The gym? The shadows? Walter looked at her, eyes haunted but resolute. "Because heroes get parades and ghosts don't get chased. I didn't want medals, I wanted quiet. Somewhere I could mop floors and forget how many men I couldn't save." Rivera swallowed hard. "You deserved more." "No," Walter said. "Morales did." At that moment, the chapel doors creaked again. Drew entered, slowly, respectfully. Behind him, Cheryl. Both wore civilian clothes. No ranks, no salute, just presence. "Sorry," Drew said gently. "Didn't mean to interrupt." "You're not," Walter replied. "You're part of it now." Cheryl approached and handed him a folder. "You should see this." Walter opened it and froze. Inside, declassified documents, field reports, photographs. One showed Morales with a faint grin, standing beside Walter, mid-operation. Another, a handwritten letter, dated 2 months before Morales died. "To the man who stayed," it read. "If you're reading this, I hope they finally let you come home." Walter's hands trembled. "I never saw this," he whispered. "It was buried," Cheryl said, "but not anymore." For the first time in years, Walter let the silence go. His shoulders relaxed. His breath steadied. Rivera reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small black box. "No medals, I remember," she said. "But maybe. This one doesn't belong to the military." Inside was a silver coin, not standard issue. On it, engraved, "To the quiet ones, who stayed." Walter blinked fast, then nodded. No salute, no ceremony, just a quiet acknowledgement in a quiet chapel for a man who'd finally stopped hiding. The gym was empty, lights dimmed. Echoes of the day's drills still clung to the walls like smoke. Walter stood alone by the punching bag, taping his wrist, like muscle memory had taken over. Each rap, tight, clean, intentional. He didn't hear Drew walk in, but he knew. "You ever miss it?" Drew asked, leaning on the doorframe. Walter didn't look up. I miss what it meant, not what it became. Drew stepped closer, his voice cautious. I read the full report, what they did to Morales. To you. Walter gave a dry smile. They didn't do it to me, I let them. Silence. That letter Morales left, Drew said, pulling a folded page from his jacket. There's something on the back. Walter turned at a sketch. 2 soldiers, one dragging the other. The signature, they only see the medals. We see the men. Walter's throat tightened. He drew this in country. When we were pinned, it was raining. I didn't even know he kept it. Drew looked at him, then said, You saved him. No, Walter replied. He saved me. Guilt eats you alive when you survive people better than you. Drew nodded. But what if that guilt's been lying to you all these years? Walter froze. You stayed, Drew continued. You protected those civilians. You refused to follow the order. You weren't just a ghost, Walter. You were the conscience no one wanted to admit existed. Walter let the truth settle. Let the pain soften just enough. Then Drew pulled out a card. Next week. Fort Bragg. There's a private ceremony. They want to honor Morales posthumously. Walter raised an eyebrow. Posthumously, huh? And you, Drew added. But only if you're ready. Walter looked down at his taped hands. I don't want applause. You won't get any, Drew said. Just silence. But this time the kind that says we remember. Walter exhaled slowly. When? Friday, noon. Walter walked past Drew, tossing the tape in the bin. Then I guess I've got a jacket to iron. Meanwhile, in a Pentagon side office, Colonel Rivera sat at her desk reviewing files Cheryl had recovered. Names, orders, redacted lines that finally bled into truth. And a memo. Reconsideration of disavowed ops. Iron harvest and aftermath. She circled the words. Time to clean up what we buried. At that same moment, Cheryl entered the gym, catching Walter just as he grabbed his coat. They're not just honoring you, you know, she said. I figured. She handed him a folder. Inside, photos of the civilians he and Morales protected. Grown up, safe. One had become a teacher. Another, a medic. They lived. Walter stared at their faces. For the first time in decades, his silence wasn't from pain. It was peace. The hall at Fort Bragg wasn't grand. No cameras, no stage. Just a semicircle of chairs, a weathered podium, and a flag folded so tightly it looked like it held its breath. Walter stood at the edge of it all, in a freshly pressed suit. His hands, clasped behind his back. No medals. No ribbons. Just the faint outline of an old tattoo beneath his sleeve. Drew approached quietly. You sure about this? Walter didn't answer right away. He simply looked ahead where a bronze plaque now bore the name Sepile, Rafael Morales. He deserves this, Walter said. A young woman stepped up to the microphone. Morales' daughter. My father never spoke much about what happened, but he wrote letters. In every one he mentioned a man who walked through fire but never left ashes. That was Walter. Gasps whispered through the crowd. Some veterans lowered their heads. One SEAL visibly wept. Then the colonel stepped forward. She nodded to Walter. Would you like to say something? Walter approached slowly, his breath steady, his voice low. I'm not here to speak for the dead, he said. I'm here because one of them kept me alive, not with bullets, with belief. Morales believed that doing the right thing was worth the cost, even if no one saw it, even if history got rewritten. He never asked for applause. Neither did I. He paused. But today, maybe we're not applauding, maybe we're just remembering. He stepped down. No thunderous applause, just solemn silence. One by one, SEALs, officers, and civilians approached the plaque. Some touched it, others stood still. When it was Drew's turn, he knelt, not in mourning but in respect. That evening, Walter sat alone outside the barracks, watching the sun set. Cheryl joined him. You ever think you'd get to this moment? She asked. No, Walter said. But I think Morales did. She handed him a sealed envelope. No return address. Inside was a photo. Morales and Walter, years younger, standing in the mud, grinning like boys. On the back scrawled in ink, "You were never invisible to me." Walter looked up at the horizon. "No more hiding," he said. And in that silence there were no ghosts, only peace. Thank you for watching. To everyone who stayed with us until the very end, thank you. This story was crafted to honor the silent heroes, the forgotten warriors, and the quiet souls who never needed recognition to make an impact. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect. And if you believe stories like these deserve to be heard, share this video with someone who needs it. Subscribe for more human stories that truly matter. Until next time, stay humble, stay strong.